So in the last YouTube video and Periscope broadcast, we talked about the line of parenting. And we talked about how it is our job to glorify God. And we do that by loving God and by loving others. We also talked about how that by loving others, we are following 1 Corinthians 13. And our goal for our children when they start as an infant to end up as an adult is to be having patience, kindness, gentleness, not proud, not envious, all of those virtues by the time they're an adult. And how we get to those points is by discipline. And as we discipline, we start as an infant where we are 100% making decisions, 100% that child's authority, and 100% responsible for that child. And that tapers off as they grow into adulthood, where then they are responsible for themselves. And we are commanded by God to discipline and put up boundaries for this child. So let me give you a little bit of background. First of all, we have 4 kiddos, 3 boys and 1 girl. 2 of them have ADHD. Our third one has pretty severe ADHD. And if you're not familiar with that, that's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's a neurological based disorder that is developmentally inappropriate levels of impulsivity, inattention, and in some case with hyperactivity. Basically, it's an inability to self-regulate. Well, having little man in our life has made things a little interesting. I thought I could discipline and I thought I could be a good mom until God introduced him, and suddenly everything went out the window and I didn't know what to do. Now, while I still don't, God has provided us with people to help us along the way. And so in our therapy, in our psychology appointments and research, etc., I found out that if I wanted to make any headway with little man, I had to stop looking at all the commotion and all the wrong that he was doing, and we had to start focusing on one issue at a time. So out of all the issues that were going on, where did I start? Which one did I pick? And I thought about, of all the rules, what was the one rule that was most important? Without fail, I had to have him do this. And that was immediately come to me. So we started out with that. Now, immediately come is not only an obedience issue, it's also a safety issue. Think about in a grocery store. Think about in a parking lot, or if you're at a park playing, when you call that child's name, you need that child to immediately come to you. So this is our first step to first time obedience. When you ask the child to do something, they immediately come. Now, I use this because our child had ADHD, but if you have not disciplined at all, this is a perfect place to start with that immediate obedience, because everything will then factor with what you begin here. So let me explain how we started this with him, and that's what I've used with our other kiddos. First of all, we started with a game. When he wasn't in trouble, which is a little hard to find sometimes, when he wasn't in trouble, was in control, was able to sit down and focus for a few minutes time, we sat down and we talked about a game that I was going to introduce to him. And I said, we are going to work on you obeying mommy the first time by when mommy says come, you come immediately. So I said, little man, when I say, please come to mommy, I want you immediately to say, yes, ma'am, I am coming. So I would say, little man, come to mommy, and he would say, yes, ma'am, I am coming. Then the second thing was he was supposed to immediately run to me. So I explained this little game we were going to play. And I started out with real needs and really silly needs. So that first day, and I chose a day that we could totally focus on this. So that first day, I called him and I said, little man, please come to mommy. And he would say, yes, ma'am, I am coming. And I'd hear those feet pitter-patter towards me. And then I would give him a candy corn if he immediately obeyed. Some of those were real needs because I needed him to come to dinner. Some of those were real needs because I needed him to wash his hands or pick up a toy. And then I also did silly needs. And so I would have him and I would say, little man, come to mommy, please. And he would say, yes, ma'am, I am coming. He'd come running and I'd say, I just want to tell you I love you. And I'd give him a hug and then he'd start to run back. And sometimes when he'd start to run back, I would stop and say, little man, please come to me. And he would say, yes, ma'am, I am coming, and run around. And I would say, I just wanted to say I love you. So again, and he would giggle with it. So we had fun with this, but he was learning first time obedience. We were over the top, and I gave him a lot of encouragement. Now, if you don't want to use candy corn, that's fine. You can use stickers. You could just use hugs. Whatever rewards your child. The main thing about this is you have to have consistency. Every time you call that child needs to come say, yes, ma'am, I am coming, and come running. Remember, it's twofold. The second thing is you have to follow through with the reward or follow through with the consequence. Now, for little man, the consequence was 7 minutes of jumping on the indoor trampoline that we have. And that 7 minutes comes from therapy in physical therapy as well as occupational therapy. They have the child do the activities for 7 minutes. I honestly don't know where the 7 minutes comes from, but that's what we continued then at home, was at 7 minutes. And that 7 minutes of jumping gave him the sensory impulse he needed. Also, it was a reminder that when mommy says to come, that obedience needs to follow. So we did this game for a couple of days, and he was really excited about it. He was getting positive reinforcement for the immediate obedience. And then the reward started tapering off. So after a while, he didn't get a reward every time he came to me and obeyed. But I was calling him for more real reasons as well. Also, the consequences had to be followed through because we were real reasons and we needed real obedience. So that was how we started it, and that is how we have continued it to this day. About 4 years later, he will still say, yes, ma'am, I am coming, and I should immediately have him come. Let me preface one thing. One of the reasons why I say, yes, ma'am, I am coming, is that sometimes now he will be unable to immediately come. Let's say he's using the restroom, and so he will say, yes, ma'am, Mommy, I'm using the restroom. I will be there as soon as I'm done. So we have set that foundation of him answering not only verbally, but also answering him by responding by running to me. This is the foundation of immediate obedience, that first time obedience that we're talking about. And this will apply to anything. This applies to when you tell the child to pick up their toy. Little man, I need you to come pick up your train. He would immediately say, yes, ma'am, I am coming. Pick up the train, go put it away. And then you need to make sure that the child has followed through and actually put it away in the correct time. Second thing is there is an instant reward for doing the right thing. And this was huge. Little man was making so many choices. And by me focusing on one issue at a time and ignoring a lot of the other issues, he was able to get a lot of positive reinforcement. Second thing about this is I was training his ears to listen for my voice. With kids, they get so focused on what they're doing and they tune out a lot of the noise in the background. And we want to train the child to listen for that. And think about this in a spiritual way. We want to train the child to listen for the Holy Spirit's voice as well, and to have that obedience like Samuel. Yes, Lord, I am listening. And then the other thing is that he got attention for being good. It wasn't constant negative attention. He was getting positive attention for making good choices. So those are the basics for how I taught first-time obedience to little man and to the rest of our kiddos. We started with a game and made it very fun and positive, and then we tapered off to where it was less rewards and more about obedience and follow through. The thing is, if you choose to do this, and I cannot emphasize this enough, if you choose to do this, you have to be consistent. You have to follow through. If you do not, then I'm going to be honest, you're wasting your time, because the child will learn that what you say is not what you're going to do. The child will learn that when you call for them, you're not going to make sure they actually come. So if you decide, you and your spouse, to teach first-time obedience, which, as we talked about, is a commandment and must be taught when they are young, so that then they can be responsible for their actions when they're older, you must follow through and you must be consistent.